Hi everyone, welcome to English 1020. This is video 1.2. So hopefully by now you've had a chance to watch both the syllabus video and the first video that talked you through Canvas and the course more generally. I hope by now you've also had a chance to complete the syllabus quiz and do your first reading response. Don't forget that you also have an assignment due on Sunday, your first discussion board or like weekly journal, okay? I will say first that this might seem a little backwards. Again, this is an 8-week course. So instead of working on the terms and the things that you need to know for Project 1, we're going to do an overview of Project 1 first. So that way, in the next few weeks, when we talk about the things, the terms and the things that you'll need to know how to do for Project 1, hopefully you can you'll realize like, oh, okay, I need to do this for my Project 1. I need to put this here, or I see how this all fits together. So it might seem a little backwards to start with going right into the first assignment, but I hope that it will help you as you do the readings. You can see, okay, I really need to pay attention to this because this is in my first assignment, okay? All right, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce the assignment of Project 1. Project 1, the assignment sheet is now available on our Canvas under the first week's module. The rubric is also up there, so please check those out at your earliest convenience. And then the second thing we'll be doing is we'll be discussing the rhetorical situation. So that will be your first kind of term that you need to know for Project 1, okay? All right, so here is the assignment. This for the most part mirrors the assignment that is on our Canvas page. I've just cut it down so we can talk about the main components of it, okay? So the first project is a rhetorical analysis. That might be a term that you're familiar with. You may have written one of these in high school, and you may not have. That's completely fine too. I find that a lot of times my classes are split. A lot of students are like, okay, yeah, I've done this. And then the other, half of the class is like, I have no idea what this is. So that's completely fine. This is a very popular first year writing assignment. So it's very likely that your friends who even went off to different universities are writing a very similar assignment in their first writing course. So what the rhetorical analysis is essentially breaking down components of something. In this case, it will be an article, and examining the components that make it up. Okay, that doesn't maybe sound like something you would do in an English class, but hopefully as we go through the assignment, it'll begin to make a little more sense, okay? So what you will be doing, as this says here, the something you'll be studying are examples of nonfiction writing designed to persuade readers to take action. To do your analysis, you will use rhetorical analysis, which is an advanced reading strategy used to explore how rhetorical messages work in specific situations. So I realize that might just sound like a whole bunch of nonsense right now, and that's completely fine. We will begin to break this down over the next few slides, okay? So here is the prompt itself. You will be writing a 1,500 to 2,000 word paper that identifies, describes, and analyzes the argumentative and rhetorical strategies used by the author of the article you are assigned to study. So you will also notice that on the first week module on Canvas, I've uploaded a list of articles. I believe that I have selected 10 of them. So you may select one of the 10, whichever appeals to you. I've tried to cover a wide array of topics, some serious, some less serious, some very recent, some a little more dated. So please go through and see what article appeals to you. This semester, I've done something really cool, I think, and all of the articles are written by women of color. So I'm excited to have a chance to kind of showcase their work and look at what their writing has to tell us. So hopefully you will find one that you like. They're all good. You can pick whatever you like. So check those out on Canvas though, okay? So what the sections of the paper will look like what you're actually going to be doing. You will have an introduction, obviously. This is going to introduce the topic, the purpose of your paper. You will then briefly summarize the article, and you will describe the rhetorical situation and the purpose of the article. The main bulk of your paper will be on this section right here, section 3. You will provide an analysis of the article, okay? So you will identify the claims or types of arguments. You can see what they are here. We're not going to get into that today. That will be for next week, but you will be doing that in your paper. And then you will describe the ethos, pathos, and logos that are used by the author. So you may be familiar with these terms. You may not be. Both are perfectly fine. We'll go over them next week. You can feel really cool and smart when you can pull those terms out. But that will comprise the bulk of your paper, okay? This section right here, the analysis of the article. Oops. All right, and then finally, you will have a claim or claim/conclusion. So you'll conclude the paper and you'll want to make an evaluative claim about the persuasive strategies used in the article. So the good news about this paper is you are not making a thesis statement necessarily that says, I argue that climate change is, you know, the biggest, the biggest thing affecting us in 2020. That's a horrible argument, but whatever, that could be your argument. That's not what you're going to be doing in this paper. Instead, your evaluative claim might be something like, in Toni Morrison's article, she uses ethos, pathos, and logos to effectively convince her author of X. Okay, so you are evaluating the strategies of the article and the author that you are reading. Okay, hopefully we can see kind of the difference between that and a more traditional argumentative or research paper. This makes it perhaps slightly easier because instead of presenting your own work, you're just analyzing the ways that someone else does or does present their own work. Okay. Here is a further breakdown of this assignment. This is a really good template or outline to use if you are unsure of organization, if you are nervous about the rhetorical analysis. This is just a little bit more detailed than the previous slides. This is also on your assignment sheet, so you can see that there, okay? The last thing on here that I want to talk about is that you will need a title, as you can see at the very bottom here. This assignment is taught across all sections of English 1020 at Wayne State. So this is not my assignment sheet. So you can see that the titles that are included here are super creative and super fun. I do not require that you make your title super creative and super fun. It's awesome if you can do that, but I understand that this is your first ever college paper. So it might be kind of scary. Hopefully it's fun, you're excited, but I understand that you might not feel that you can make something so clever at the moment. I certainly was not good at doing that, especially my first semester in college, but really for my entire undergraduate career, I struggled with creating titles. So you should have a title for your paper, but it doesn't need to be something so fancy. It might simply be a rhetorical analysis of, and then your article's title, okay? Okay, so here are your minimum requirements. It should be 1,500 words. Now, I'm not a huge stickler. If you submit, 1,400 words, I'm not going to mark you off for that. But if you do start getting, 1,200 words, that's when it starts getting a little dicey, and you will get points off. But so you should aim for about 1,500 words, and then you will also have the cover letter. It needs to be typed double-spaced. Should be formatted for MLA style, which you can access here if you want to see kind of what that looks like. It should be edited, obviously. And then you need to correctly identify and describe the things that I have outlined on the past slides, okay? The due date for this paper is 2 weeks from today. So it will be due by Friday, July 10th. And again, this is an 8-week course, so it is due much faster than perhaps you're used to. So get started on selecting an article, looking through the textbook, my brain, looking through the textbook this weekend with the things that you should be reading to kind of prepare yourself to tackle this, okay? But keep that deadline in your head that you have 2 weeks from today to work on that. Okay. So moving on from the assignment, I want to briefly talk about what is rhetoric. You might be like, I'm in a rhetoric and composition class, and I don't even know what that means. Like, people just say rhetoric, and what does it mean? We're writing a rhetorical analysis. What does that mean? So rhetoric is essentially, it sounds like a super fancy word, but it is the available means of persuasion. So it is the way that you write and speak in order to convince your audience of your message. Rhetoric is often associated with like ancient Greeks, Plato, Aristotle. I'm sure that you are familiar with those names, and you kind of thought of them as like great speakers. It's also often associated with politicians, jobs or vocations that are meant to get their audience to do something, okay? So essentially, we analyze the rhetoric of everything we encounter, whether it's a film, music video, article, book, or even a text message. So we might not realize it, but we are really we encounter rhetoric in every single thing we do. Usually I will show a music video at this point and we'll analyze the rhetoric of it. I might give you guys a few examples of music videos to analyze next week that might help think about it from a less formal standpoint by looking at something like Taylor Swift's music video or something else to think about the ways that the message is being portrayed, even if they're not using words, right? I think we can all agree that we can see advertisements or videos that don't even have to say anything, but they convey a message, right? If a movie opens with a scene of rain and the screen looks all kind of gray and gloomy, we already have an idea of what might happen, okay? We don't expect maybe, you know, a wonderful anniversary party being thrown. Maybe we're at a gravesite or a funeral, or someone has, I don't know, just found out they have an illness, something like that, right? We expect that just from the setting, just from what we see within the first 2 seconds of a film, okay? So you already do this kind of analysis with everything. And it's just a matter of being aware of it and kind of fine-tuning your critical thinking and awareness of it, okay? So as I've perhaps already made clear, why should you care about rhetoric? As I've said here, understanding the methods of persuasion used by authors, artists, journalists, etc., allows you to question the content and assess for yourself the validity of it. So when you listen to a politician's speech, whether they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, anything, there's obviously a purpose behind that. And if you listen to every single speech, you're going to have, you know, if we take Republicans and Democrats, they're probably going to tell you very polar opposite things about the same issue. So when you approach those, you need to assess how they're speaking, why they're speaking, what is the reason that they're doing this, what are they trying to get me to believe, to come up with the truth or your interpretation of the truth, right? So it is helpful to be aware of the ways that people use rhetoric to convince, persuade their audience, okay? So we do this by critical reading and critical thinking. You bring your own experiences and knowledge to the text. I am very big on including yourself in the readings that you do, right? When we approach anything, we bring to that article, that movie, that song, our own experiences. I think a really good example of this is when you're having a really sad day, something horrible just happened, I don't know, you and your partner broke up, and you hear a sad song on the radio. That is probably the last thing you want to listen to at that moment, right? Because you are bringing your own experiences to that. So it might change how you interpret it. Maybe you're listening to a song that really isn't very sad, but what had just happened to you is making you read it through that lens, okay? So we want to be aware of that when we're reading and encountering things. So these are just some questions you might ask, and they're helpful as you begin to think about the rhetorical analysis article you will select. What arguments is this author responding to? How do I know what the author says is true? Can I think of an exception to the author's argument? Is the author's evidence legitimate, sufficient? I don't know. These are things that you will have to evaluate. All right, so the rhetorical situation, all of that to hopefully bring us to the understanding that rhetoric matters. Even if we don't necessarily know the terms, we don't know what ethos means, but we can still identify someone is trying to persuade me by using their credibility. And I need to understand and evaluate if I should listen to them or believe them, or if I should push back against it, right? So the rhetorical situation is kind of everything that's brought to the table when it comes to the article that's presented. So there are three components. You have the writer, the subject, and the audience, and you can look at how they kind of overlap here. But you want to look at the exigence, which is simply why the writer is writing about the subject. The purpose, what the writer is seeking from the audience. The genre, how the subject is presented to the audience. And then kind of in between here is the context. Who is discussing this? Where, when, is this an issue, etc. So as you can see in the middle here is the word text, right? So this is what we're analyzing. It can be a text, it can be a movie, it can be a music video. That is what is at the center of all this. So when you select your article, you're going to want to think about just very broadly, who is writing this? Is it, you already all know that your articles are written by women of color, but if you didn't know that, you would want to look at this article and say, is this written by a man? Is this written by a woman, someone who's non-binary? Is this written by a white person? Is this written by a person of color? Is this an old person, a young person? Is this someone who just recently graduated college? These are all things that might impact the way that the writer chooses to portray their argument, okay? And then the audience. So a really good way to start with thinking about who the audience is what platform is this published on? So I always give the example of like Fox News. People know that Fox News is generally a Republican and right-leaning news station. So you can imagine that the audience fits a certain demographic based off of that. It is the same thing for articles that are published online, right? The audience of Huffington Post might be different than the audience of Nature, which is a science publication, or the audience of BuzzFeed. That is certainly different than the audience of Huffington Post. So you can look at that and you can think, who might the audience be, okay? A good way to think about this, not in an academic, an academic sense, is to think about different social media platforms. So I think everyone, you guys actually might even be a little too young for this, but I think there was like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, a transition from everyone was on Facebook to now like Facebook is where your grandmother talks with her friends, right? Whereas Snapchat has a different audience. You're going to find different people on that platform, just as you're going to find different people on the platform of Twitter versus Instagram, right? There's different demographics and groups and audiences of people who are drawn to these things, okay? And then finally, the subject. So that is essentially just what is being said. How is it presented? How is it written? Why is it being written, etc. Okay? So when you look at the articles, these are some things that you might want to consider. If you can easily identify who the writer is, who the subject is, who the audience is, because this rhetorical situation is the underlying foundation for kind of the rest of your rhetorical analysis, okay? So this is a good place to start, I think. Finally, I wanted to link to this site that I think has some helpful graphics. Let's see if it'll open. And helpful conversations on what is a rhetorical situation. You can see here we have the author, the text, the audience, and it all kind of comes together and they analyze that for you. So if you are struggling with understanding this, we are not done talking about it, don't worry. I realize that this is a lot of information at once. don't be overwhelmed. I understand that it is overwhelming to jump into this so soon, but I have complete faith in you all. So if you need more help with that, peruse this site. I think it might help you. And I look forward to talking to you all soon. I hope you have a great weekend. Bye, guys.